My wife and I first noticed some unusual behavior with my son Daniel at the age of 2. It was in the story circle in the Early Years Center in Kitchener. While other kids would gather around the storyteller and pay close attention, our son would listen for a little while, then wander off. We didn't think of anything at the time. He's just being a kid. It was only later, at the age of 7, when he started acting up in school. At home, he was a normal kid. He loved reading, playing, building with Lego, and playing video games like Minecraft. So that came as that much more of a surprise to us when we got the call to come to the principal's office. We had him tested, and he was diagnosed with ADHD. And that's when our journey of discovery began. I'd like to share some of the learnings from that journey with you today. The first learning we had was that ADHD can be hard to identify. Despite the name, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that term can be a bit misleading. Daniel wasn't hyperactive. In fact, he was quite the opposite. He could pay attention to things for hours on end. As a result, ADHD can be hard to identify because a number of the common behaviors, such as inattention, impulsivity, or mood swings, can be common behaviors for children. It's more of a matter of degree. If you display enough of the behaviors and with sufficient severity, then you may have ADHD. The other challenge for us as parents was that it was hard to accept. Daniel's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Fitzgerald, first advised us that his behavior was abnormal. And to be honest, we were quite a little bit defensive at the time, and we discounted her comments, like thinking, what's normal behavior for a kindergartner? But with 20/20 hindsight, we could have identified the problem that much sooner. So if you know someone with some of those who's displaying some of those behaviors, I certainly recommend you to have it check it out. I know that for our son Daniel, gave him a huge sense of relief when he did find out, in that it helped to understand what was happening, why it was happening, and most importantly, that it wasn't his fault. Our second learning was that ADHD is a disability and should not be ignored. You can't just tough it out, and it's likely not going to go away on its own. Given that we didn't know anything about ADHD, we consulted with specialists and people at Daniel's school. And we developed a plan, both for at home and at school. The first step was to notify his teachers of his issues so they were aware. There was also other support in the school, such as iPads to help him take notes in class. There were fidgets to just keep his hands busy, and where necessary, additional time with his tests and assignments. At home, we helped provide support by maintaining a consistent schedule and help working with him to reinforce certain techniques like calming techniques. Through all these measures, he was able to cope with his ADHD, and we were able to get through elementary school. The third learning we had was that it was the importance of being, the need to adapt and be open to change and new ideas. So we thought we were getting along okay. That lasted until Daniel hit grade 5, and things gradually changed for the worse. He started having trouble in class, had trouble submitting his homework, had trouble writing his tests. The calls to come to the principal's office started again. The most worrisome sign for us was a big drop in his confidence, and Daniel was slowly becoming a shadow of his former self. We took a number of steps to respond, the first being something called cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT for short. For those who are not aware, CBT is about identifying those destructive thoughts and behaviors and learning escape mechanisms. So some of those techniques might include self-awareness, deep breathing, meditation, things like that. And all those helped Daniel cope with some of the symptoms, but didn't really address the underlying issue, which was his ADHD itself. We needed to adapt and change our approach. Up to that point in time, we had considered medication and rejected it. We didn't want to be bad parents. We didn't want Daniel to be dependent on drugs for the rest of his life. This was also reinforced by a lot of well-meaning advice from friends and family based on a respected source of information, the internet. So that, a lot of the myths that are out there is that society is overdiagnosing ADHD and we're over-medicating as a result. So we plowed through that and consulted with psychologists and with Daniel himself, and we decided to give a medication called Concerta a try. The results were immediate. Before, we'd watch him struggle for hours on end, staring at a blank Word document on his computer for just staring there and just being massively frustrated. With Concerta, he had a new ability to focus. He could write tests, hang out with friends, pay attention to class. All that contributed to a massive boost in confidence and improvement in his mood. Academically, he had been getting 60s and 70s, which led to our decision to enroll him in the applied stream in high school. But with Concerta and the medication, the heartwarming part is that he felt confident enough to make the decision to go into academic and is getting 80s and 90s today. So with all that, and that all came about because we were open to adapting and changing. We were lucky. We were able to identify Daniel's ADHD pretty early on. The medication was effective, and with that and other approaches, he's now able to cope with his ADHD. Others may not be as lucky. Did you know that 3 to 7% of children suffer from ADHD? And that furthermore, 60% of those children grow up to be adults with ADHD. So the chances are you in the audience know somebody with ADHD, whether they know it or not. And so if you do see someone with those behaviors, I would definitely encourage you to encourage them to seek professional help and to get it identified. So I hope you've learned a little bit more about ADHD than when you started this session 10 minutes ago, and that you take away my three key learnings. One, that ADHD can be hard to identify, but it is based on a number of common behaviors and, again, the severity and frequency of those behaviors. The second is that ADHD is a disability, and it should not be ignored, but it can be treated. And last but not least, if you do know someone with ADHD, do keep an open mind and be flexible to the options. I do want to let you know that Daniel's doing well today and back to being a normal teenager, and he's back to reading, hanging out with friends, and of course, playing video games. Thank you.